So Nancy Pelosi has formally asked her chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment. We are moving beyond the inquiry into what may have happened into an official impeachment against the president, with the big update being that the Democrats have planned new hearings to see evidence on Monday where presentations will be brought forth to determine whether or not there is evidence against the president, of which there is very little. Other than the fact that the president has been accused of obstruction, we don't really have any facts. And in one of the most bold things I've seen in a while, Matt Gaetz asked a question to the Judiciary panel yesterday. If they had, let me read what he says. He wanted to ask if any witness has any personal knowledge of a single material fact of the Adam Schiff report. No one answered in the affirmative. So why did we have an impeachment hearing yesterday? And I'll admit, I tuned it out. I jumped in from time to time, but you know what the problem was? Yesterday, the Judiciary Committee brought in 3 anti-Trump scholars, and the Republicans had one kind of, not really pro-Trump scholar, but anti-impeachment scholar. If I want to see a group of people opine on their feelings about the president, I'll turn on MSNBC or CNN. Why we had a hearing, I have no idea. And because there was nothing in the hearing that presented any evidence or any reason to suggest Trump should be impeached, I just didn't bother with it. But there is some interesting information coming out now. It appears, I kid you not, that they are actually seeking to impeach the president because of Russia. I'm not kidding. It's not even about the Ukraine scandal. Let me show you this from left-wing journalist Aaron Rupar. Quote, "This isn't about Ukraine. This is about Russia. Who benefited by withholding that military assistance? Russia. It's about Russia. Russia is invading eastern Ukraine. All roads lead to Putin. Understand that." How about this story from Politico? Dems signal Mueller-related impeachment charges as witnesses assail Trump. One legal expert said Trump's Ukraine dealings were, quote, "worse than the misconduct of any prior president." It's insane. The Democrats have taken conspiracy, debunked conspiracy by their own investigation, and are pushing forward now with a legitimate impeachment, possibly a huge mistake. Now, they're not yet voting on articles. They're going to present evidence, which is another drawn-out, delayed process. But according to these stories, it may actually get to that point where they do end up voting on impeachment within the next week or before the end of the year. This will be a huge mistake. The Republicans will then have a legitimate trial in the Senate. And because they control it, and because it'll be more legitimate, they're going to call witnesses like Adam Schiff, like Joe and Hunter Biden. I don't understand what Democrats think they're getting from this. They're destroying everything with little to no, like there's no real evidence here. I'll be interested to see what they present, but I gotta admit, I'm like most people tuning this out. And, you know, let me be honest with you guys. I have a bunch of other stories prepared. But because this is the formal announcement of impeachment, I want to stay up to date with the big news. And I know most people probably don't care. But let's get started with what Nancy Pelosi literally said and what's going to be the next steps in impeachment before I show you. The Democrats are abusing their power. They're insulting the president's family, and they are obsessed with this conspiracy theory about Russia. Please stop. But they can't let it go. They have never stopped. Even before Trump got elected, they were talking about Russia. Even after they had their own investigation, they won't stop talking about Russia. And now Nancy Pelosi today is saying it's Russia. They can't. They've lost the plot. I'm sorry, if you spend millions of dollars on your own investigation and you find nothing. In fact, Mueller says no evidence of collusion. It just didn't happen. And you still can't let it go. There's derangement, depravity, and outright corruption. But we'll get to it. Let's get started with the story from CBS News, the straight news about what's happening with the impeachment and what Pelosi wants. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do is share this video. Look, I got to compete with these big mainstream media players. I have no big budget to compete with their marketing departments. But if you share this, that's more powerful than any marketing department. But more importantly, this segment, as well as all of my segments, appear every day on all podcast platforms. So check this out on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you want to listen to an hour and a half of every segment I do, there are 6 segments per day. Let's get started with the news. CBS News reporting. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called on Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler to draft articles of impeachment against President Trump. Quote, "Sadly, but with confidence and humility, With allegiance to our founders and a heart full of love for America, today I am asking our chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment, Pelosi said. Pelosi's announcement is a formal indication that the House will move forward with impeaching Mr. Trump after weeks of hearings. Democrats have previously insisted that they had not decided whether to draft articles of impeachment against Mr. Trump, although many Republicans believed impeachment to be a foregone conclusion. But interestingly, I believe it was just the other day, even Eric Swalwell said he wasn't entirely convinced he would vote on this. And we have seen many media outlets, including The Week, The Hill, or the contributors, I should say, of these outlets, saying it's time to abandon impeachment and call for censure of the president, a way to save face because they will lose. Not only have they lost moderates who have swung in opposition to impeachment, but, well, I'll leave it there. They've lost the moderates. And now even the media is saying it's time to back down. They've even lost one Democrat in a safe blue district saying maybe it's too close to the election and we should censure. They are risking everything for what is sure to fail. The latest update here is that they are preparing evidence hearings on Monday, saying, this is from The Hill. The Thursday announcement came hours after Speaker Pelosi formally announced that the House is drafting articles of impeachment. It also comes after the House Judiciary Committee held a hearing with constitutional experts to discuss whether Trump's efforts to pressure the Ukrainian government to investigate his political opponents amounted to impeachable offenses. But right away, I got to stop here. The media, even The Hill, who I like, have a problem of framing things exactly as the Democrats keep framing it. And framing is everything. Let me stress this point right here. They say, whether Trump's efforts to pressure the Ukrainian government to investigate his political opponent. No. Hold on there. That is not a fact. That is not what's being discussed here. What should be said is that the House Judiciary Committee held a hearing with constitutional experts to discuss whether the testimony provided thus far and the statements, conjecture, and circumstantial evidence amounted to evidence that Donald Trump was seeking to get the Ukrainian government to investigate his political opponent for political reasons. You see, it's more complicated than that. But right away, the media will just frame it this way and make it seem like, well, Trump did want his rivals investigated. No, hold on. Just jumping the gun and saying Trump wanted his rival investigated is missing important context. Trump wanted Joe Biden investigated. It just so happens that Biden is running for the Democratic nomination, but you can't assert that Trump's motivations so far had anything to do with the 2020 election, like Jerry Nadler is claiming. Jerry Nadler said the president openly welcomed interference in 2016 and demanded it in 2020. That is not a fact. That is not a statement of fact. That is conjecture and opinion. I cannot speak to why Trump wanted an investigation into Burisma and the Bidens. The right will tell you it's because they're corrupt. In fact, in one report, in the Schiff report, this is noted by Jack Posobiec, who is, I think it's fair to say, a Trump supporter, that Trump met with Viktor Orban of Hungary. Orban is very critical of Ukrainian corruption, and Hungary is a NATO member. If a NATO member meets with Trump and says, Ukraine bad, and then Trump says, I want proof that Ukraine is going to weed out corruption, well, then it stands to reason Trump's motivation was backed by weeding out corruption. Worse still for the Democrats, and I cannot stress this enough, at no point in any of the impeachment inquiries did any Democrat at any time ask a single question about Trump's intent in 2020. Not once. They could have asked, has Trump ever expressed anxiety about losing in 2020? Has Trump ever talked about Joe Biden and losing to him in 2020? Has Trump ever asked for strategies to defeat Biden related to any foreign interference, to Ukraine, to Russia? Not once. All they tried to establish was whether or not Trump was leveraging an announcement of an investigation to military aid. But all that does is prove that Trump was tying an investigation to military aid. If it's true that Trump met with a NATO member who said these people are corrupt, well, then perhaps Trump's motivation was weeding out corruption. Their defense to that is that Trump never said corruption, but that's absurd and that doesn't mean anything. Trump's not going to call them and say, what about the corruption? What about the corruption? No, he's going to say, this company did X. Look into it. He's specifically talking about Burisma. From this, the media has then targeted journalists like John Solomon. And Adam Schiff published John Solomon, a private citizen who has committed no crime and is accused of no wrongdoing. His private records were published in an attempt to to discredit a journalist's reporting. It's insane. But let's move on from here. We now know that, there you go, Nancy Pelosi has called for an official articles of impeachment, and we know this is going this way. I'm surprised, really, but here we are. All roads lead to Putin. Understand that, Nancy Pelosi says. Again, all roads lead to Putin. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. It has to do with the fact that their ace in the hole after Donald Trump was elected was the Russia investigation, and it failed. And that's all they had. So they tried the Ukraine thing. Why would Trump want to withhold aid from Ukraine? Did you know that right now aid is being withheld from other countries? I believe it's Lebanon. I could be wrong. Why isn't that coming up? You see, it stands to reason with Donald Trump criticizing NATO, saying these NATO countries aren't paying enough, criticizing Ukraine, and withholding aid from other countries. Ukraine was not a special case. Donald Trump does not want to give U.S. funds to foreign countries when they're not taking care of their own defense. So perhaps that was the real motivation behind Ukraine. Not that Trump wanted to weed out corruption, not that Trump wanted to investigate Joe Biden, but that Trump doesn't want to give American dollars to our allies. And you can criticize him for that, and we can talk about it, but that seems to be the best I can come up with right now based on what's actually going on with Trump's statements and what's happened with these other NATO countries. In no way do I find it plausible to believe that Joe Biden, who recently came out talking about little kids grabbing his legs and playing with his hair and sitting on his lap, which is creepy, a guy who sniffs little girls, I don't think Trump is all that worried about going up against Biden because Biden can't talk straight. It's an absurd narrative. Sure enough, here we are. Dems signal Mueller-related impeachment charges as witnesses assail Trump. You know that it was 2 weeks ago, about 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi said all roads lead to Putin. And I was shocked to see that, well, you know what? No, let me go here. What if I told you Russiagate never stopped? What if I told you that Ukrainegate 2, Russian Boogaloo, Russiagate 2, Ukrainian Boogaloo, is in fact not a new scandal? In fact, the Mueller investigation, Russia, none of it has ever ended. Now, perhaps we weren't seeing it. And let me show you something. First, we have this from BuzzFeed. This is, what's the date on this one? December 2nd, the Muller Memos. Yes. The Mueller investigation, which ended earlier this year, disproving the Russia collusion narrative, BuzzFeed is still publishing documents related to Mueller. I get it. Fine. You want to let people see these documents, for what, and see the investigation. It only really stands to smear and provide out of context comments. But you know what? I'm actually in favor of transparency, so I can respect BuzzFeed publishing this. Let's see it all. Let's see all the documents. And there hasn't really been anything to, no really enlightening information because we know what the result was. But the point of this is to show you that these left-wing blogs and news outlets have still carried out the Russia narrative. To hear Nancy Pelosi say all roads lead to Putin, not shocking to me. Let me show you this. Here's BuzzFeed. Here are the latest secret memos from the Mueller report. BuzzFeed News sued the U.S. government for the right to see all the work that Mueller's team kept secret. We published the second installment of the FBI summaries of interviews with key witnesses. Okay, I'm all for transparency. But, let's look at this. Here's an opinion piece from USA Today, December 4th, yesterday. Republicans have gone soft on Russia to protect Donald Trump. So much for Reagan's legacy. Republicans once were committed to the liberation of Russia's captive nations. Ukraine, now free, should have more credibility than its former captors. How about this? From CNN. This is from November 19th, a couple of weeks ago. 25 times Trump was soft on Russia. Here we go. Trump today, Trump toady William Barr is still trying to undermine the Russia investigation. December 3rd. Russiagate has never stopped. The Russiagate was already undermined by your own investigation. And yet in December, Vanity Fair is trying to claim that Bill Barr is undermining Russia. It's almost as if Russia never stopped. Let me ask you a question. How could you undermine Russia if Mueller concluded there was no collusion? Potentially obstruction, but no definitive statement on it. Some argue that because Trump can't be indicted as to the the opinion of a sitting president can't be indicted, yada, yada. That's why they're saying there's no obstruction. And the right argues, no, if there was, he would have said it. And that Mueller said it doesn't exonerate him, but that's not what investigations do. They find criminal wrongdoing. If you want to have an argument about whether or not Trump obstructed, I am absolutely listening. There is an argument to be had there. And I will say Trump has played a dangerous game by refusing his officials, by not allowing or by ordering his officials not to testify. That's where they're going to come for him in impeachment. So Trump, I think, is brazen, and I think he's too arrogant. That's going to be his downfall. But so far, I don't think they really have anything other than that. But the problem then arises because the problem that arises is you telling Trump supporters, we've levied a conspiracy theory against you that was disproven. We never stopped, even though it was disproven. And now we want to impeach you for resisting our attempts to frame you with a conspiracy that was already disproven. While Trump may be in the legal crosshairs over not allowing his officials to testify or ordering them not to, because apparently that's what got Nixon. I think you're going to be hard pressed to convince the American people come 2020 that any of this was justified. How is it that after months after the conclusion of the Mueller report, after Rachel Maddow was nearly in tears, as some would say, because the conclusion was Trump did not collude with the Russians to win. He did not collude with a campaign to interfere in the U.S. election. In fact, by the right's argument, he's attempting to dig up what actually started the whole investigation with the John Durham investigation. Trump is actually looking into the interference. And because of that, they say that's grounds to impeach the president. But how is it after all of this, they're still arguing? This article from Vanity Fair may be the most insane thing I've ever heard. Trump toady William Barr is still trying to undermine the Russia investigation. Have you all lost your minds? The Russia investigation is over, and it showed no collusion. That's it. And they're saying this ahead of a new DOJ report demolishing Trump's witch hunt claims. The Attorney General has told people the investigation never should have happened. Sure, it's his opinion, but they ordered it. So you can say, haha, they ordered it, but it turns out they were wrong. But you know what? They still ordered the investigation, right? You got to give them credit for that, even if it does prove them wrong. We'll see how they handle it. So far, Bill Barr is disputing some of those claims. But the narrative about Russia has never stopped, and I don't think it will. Nancy Pelosi today is arguing that Russia is the reason. Nadler is saying Russia, and Politico's reporting that's the case. There are a few other things that absolutely need to be highlighted here. The most important of which I talked about yesterday. I talked about at 1 p.m. and I will not stop talking about it. Adam Schiff's surveillance state. The Democrat demands and then discloses the call logs of his opponents. Let me add to this. You want to impeach the president for abuse of power. You believe that Donald Trump used his power to try and dig up dirt on a political opponent. That he contacted a foreign government and said, I want dirt on my political opponent. That's your accusation. It's not been proven. Fine. Adam Schiff used the powers of the House to get the private phone details of an American citizen, a journalist, no less, protected under the First Amendment, who committed no crime and is accused of no wrongdoing. And even after Schiff obtained the private phone calls of this journalist, John Solomon, has still not accused him of any wrongdoing. What gives the U.S. government the right to do this? And if you think there is grounds for impeachment based on what Trump did, and Adam Schiff literally subpoenaed phone records for Devin Nunes, who was doing his job, then it stands to reason Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, and Nadler are facing the same accusations. Where does this leave us? Already there are calls for the Republicans to subpoena the private phone records of Schiff, Pelosi, and otherwise. When do we stop throwing rocks? I understand Adam Schiff is the one who committed this violation of our norms, of civil rights, of journalists, of the free press. But what about the Republicans? When are they going to stand up and call this out? I do not believe the appropriate response is to weaponize the same abuse of powers and start digging into the phone records of their political opponents. I believe the response should be potentially to censure Adam Schiff, to remove him or to impeach him, not to continually engage in the same civil rights abuses as the Democrats. But lo and behold, we learn from the Wall Street Journal, and I know if you're listening to the podcast, you'll hear more about this when I go on outraged rant about the violations of the free press. But we learned the Republicans knew about the subpoenas, and they did nothing. But that brings me to the next story. This one is from The Blaze. Obama says he never attacked the press and gets a scathing history lesson. This story is about Barack Obama spying on a journalist, James Rosen, I believe. Barack Obama, he prosecuted more whistleblowers who leaked to journalists than all other presidents combined. They want to scream that Donald Trump calling the press fake news is a violation of democracy. Yet when Adam Schiff violates the free press rights by pulling up the private details from an American journalist who committed no crime and was accused of no wrongdoing, they say nothing. When Barack Obama spies on the press, they say nothing. And finally, months after we learned Trump did not collude with Russians, Nancy Pelosi comes out in December and says all roads lead to Putin and calls for an impeachment. It'll never stop. They refuse to accept the results. And here we are today. We'll see what happens. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. YouTube.com/TimCastNews. And for those, I'm gonna let you all on a big update. I'm getting a root canal later, which means tomorrow might be interesting. We'll see if I can talk. I have not missed a single day in terms of production. I'm sorry, I did miss one day when I was doing setup for Subverse, but I have not missed a single day of work. We'll see if I am forced out of producing content due to dental work. But stick around. I do have more segments coming up at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then. YouTube.com/TimCastNews.